Thank you so much for coming. This is very exciting to have you all here. Thank you again. I just want to start by acknowledging that Waterloo, the University of Waterloo, including the Waterloo, Cambridge, and Kitchener campuses, are located on the territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples, and they're situated in the Haldimand Tract, which was land that was promised to the Haudenosaunee of the Six Nations of the Grand River, and it is the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. So I would like to introduce myself first. My name is Kayleanna Giesinger. I'm the campus director for the Hult programming. I'm a fourth-year environmental engineering student, and I've had a lot of involvement on campus to do with social change and where does entrepreneurship and the private sector fit into social change through social enterprises. And with me is also Roopa Reddy. She is our campus academic advisor, and she's been doing the Hult Prize for 3 years now. It's my first year. So she is amazing, and we would be nothing without Roopa. But she's also a lecturer at the Conrad School of Entrepreneurship and Business, and she's been involved with entrepreneurship and social change projects for quite a few years and taking place globally and locally. So this is the timeline of the events of what's going to happen today. So initially, I'm going to welcome you all and tell you all a little bit about what Hult Prize is and announce the topic for this year. And then after that, we have a special guest, Dr. Amelia Clarke, who has a lot of involvement with the Sustainable Development Goals and sustainable planning within communities. So she's going to talk about her experience and how that fits into the Hult Prize Challenge. And then we have a little bit about what Roopa will talk about, and she'll be talking about what social entrepreneurship is and how entrepreneurship fits into social change. Then after that, I will talk again about the competition process, a lot of what you guys will be wondering about, and those are the detailed logistics of how you'll compete and what will happen after the on-campus competition. Following that, we have a Q&A panel of previous competitors who have all made it to regionals in the past. So you can ask them any questions that you may have, big picture, little picture, logistics. Then we have announcements, potentially some exciting prizes. And then we have a networking session. So you guys can meet each other, meet the planners, meet previous competitors, and eat free food and get free drinks. So what is Hult? So Hult is the intersection between purpose and profit. The driving forces for Hult are being impact-centered, profit-minded, and market-driven. And they focus on projects that have common facets related to serving the least fortunate, tackling humanity's greatest challenges, pursuing revenue and sustainability, using existing channels, creating market efficiency, pursuing large untapped markets, and being environmentally and socially responsible. So that's what it says there. That is the overview of what Hult is and what they try to aim to do. This is a quote by Muhammad Yunus. He says, "Young people should think in a different way. They should be job givers and job seekers." So this is a huge basis of what Hult believes in and what they're working towards, that young people can create the jobs that they are looking for, that there is a market for socially responsible jobs, and we are the ones who can provide them. So Hult recognizes that 80% of young people seek out brands which provide solutions to improve lives, 73% of them purchase more environmentally and socially responsible products, and 73% of them are willing to pay more for sustainable products. So they recognize this is something that young people care about, and they want to be an opportunity for these people to pursue change in the world through business and being the ones who offer the jobs that are socially responsible in the market. Their approach involves igniting passion, educating people, holding competitions, accelerating the ideas that are established, scaling them, and connecting them. They do this through 4 programs. So right now you are here learning about the on-campus program, but then after that we have regionals, the accelerator, and global finals. So on-campus touches on the igniting, educating, and competing parts of their approach, and the regionals, accelerator, and global finals have more of a focus on the acceleration, scaling, and connecting of those ideas. So far, Hult Prize has seen an impact of 100,000 participants around the world. 150 different countries have been involved, 1,500 universities have been involved, and 25,000 different startup ideas have been generated with Hult. The Waterloo journey started in 2016, 4 years ago, when 4 teams decided they wanted to compete in Hult and they registered. After that, we grew the competition in 2017, and 30 teams participated on an on-campus program, and one team went to the global finals. Then in 2018, we grew again to 40 teams participating, and 4 teams got to go to regionals. And then last year, which is our most exciting year yet, is we had 6 teams go to regionals, and 1 team, Phonic, went to the global finals and competed. And that also means that they got to go to the accelerator, they won at regionals, and then they competed for the $1 million prize. And this is all to say that our on-campus competition has been growing, and we're really excited that you're all here for the biggest kickoff we've had yet. So yay. So the topics for the 4 years that we've been involved with are doubling income, the refugee crisis, harnessing the power of energy, and youth unemployment. And these topics aim to simultaneously work towards the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And we do recognize that these ideas and these topics are really big and it can be daunting, but it's so exciting that we get to be a part of the movement to create this change. And in the past, the groups have done so incredible with coming up with ideas, and we're really, really excited to see what everyone comes up with this year. So this year's topic is very exciting. It is building startups that have a positive impact on our planet with every dollar earned. So a lot of environmental responsibility, accountability, and sustainability with our business models. And considering what's happening recently with Greta and the UN and the climate marches, we couldn't feel that the topic could be more relevant right now and what's happening. And we're really, really excited to see what everyone does come up with related to this topic. So for a little more context, Hult has come up with a fancy video that we will now watch.
Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Ahmed Ashkar. I'm the CEO and founder of the Hult Prize. I can't believe it's been 10 years since launching the Hult Prize, and we're embarking on our 2020 Hult Prize Challenge. I think this year's challenge is our most important, biggest, and most critical challenge. Why? Well, because we're going to take on challenges in the environment. However, one of the most important things to understand this year is that we're not going to rely on campaigns, NGOs, awareness initiatives, and nonprofits to solve our crisis. We're actually going to rely on the very issue that got us into this mess to begin with, capitalism. Yes, capitalism. How can capitalism change the world? I'm going to tell you. You're going to build products and services with every dollar of revenue generated will have a net impact on the environment. We're going to actually use the idea of wealth creation and making money and building for-profit enterprise in our advantage, in our favor, to use business as a driving force for good to finally bring an end to climate change, pollution, and some of the most critical crises facing our environment today. I'm excited. I hope you're as excited, and I want you to think outside the box, and I don't just say that as a cliche. To solve this challenge, you're going to have to think bigger, be bolder, be smarter than anyone ever has been in reimagining our supply chain, packaging, wellness, healthcare, hospitality, industries that rely so much on leaving such a big carbon footprint on our society that they're not worth being in business anymore. So go out there, think creatively, be bold, and I'll look forward to welcoming all of you to our accelerator and hopefully to UN, where you'll compete for $1 million in startup capital and help us lead a generation to change the world.
All right, with this in mind, I would now like to introduce our special guest speaker, Dr. Amelia Clarke. Dr. Clarke has been working on environment and sustainability issues since 1989. She's been the president of this year, Club Canada, served as a member of the Canadian Advisory Committee to the UN Habitat's World Urban Forum. She's also been a member of the Canadian delegation during the UN World Summit on Sustainable Development Negotiations. In 1996, she founded the Sierra Youth Coalition, and she launched the Sierra Youth Coalition Sustainable Campus Program, which has impacted over 80 different campuses. Currently, Dr. Clarke leads a team project on implementing sustainable community plans, including climate action plans, and she co-leads a second project on youth and innovation. Please help me welcome Dr. Amelia Clarke.
Well, it's my pleasure. I get to talk to you about how to save the world, and I mean that, while making money. So, it's working. I'm going to start with some of our global crises. So some of the big ecological crises that we have, where you might position your products and services in order to help solve these. Then I'll get into some of the solutions, really talk about what they mean by transformational change. The Hult Prize has positioned this in terms of transformational change, so I'll explain what that means, and then get into some of the core sustainable business concepts. Some of you might be familiar with this already, others might not. So I'm just assuming that some of this will be new to you. I'm not talking about my own research. So I want to start with the concept of planetary boundaries. Really, this is where our ecological crises come from, is that ecosystems have limits. You might know it in terms of an ecosystem can absorb so much, but then as soon as you cross that line, we're into toxics, we're into pollution. And so that's where you get soil contamination, you get air quality issues, you get water quality issues. But there's a certain line within which we're okay. On a planetary scale, scientists have determined that we've crossed that line on 3 big issues. So we've crossed that line on climate change, we've crossed that line on biodiversity, and we've crossed that line on nitrogen, which means we need to turn those trends around to bring us back within planetary boundaries, back within ecological limits. Practice with this clicker. So the climate crisis. How many of you were involved with or watched the climate strikes a couple of weeks ago? Okay, so about half of you. So you already know about this crisis, but let me just speak to the severity of it. I'm going to read some information from the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, around limiting warning to 1.5 degrees Celsius with no or limited overshoot depends on greenhouse gas emissions over the next decades. Global net anthropogenic CO2 emissions need to decline by about 45% from 2010 levels by 2030, reaching net zero around 2050, and concurrent deep reductions in emissions in methane and black carbon. So what I want you to pull from that in particular is 45% reduction in CO2 in about 11 years, right? 2030. This is the extreme transition that we need to make in this world if we're going to stay within 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is where there's business opportunity here. It's where the Hult Prize and where you can start thinking about where do I belong in that. Why do we need to address it? Well, we're already locked in with the carbon dioxide up there now to a sea level rise of about 1.5 meters. If we continue with business as usual, continue putting greenhouse gas emissions up, that we won't hit the 1.5, we may not even hit the 2. We might go to 3, 4 degrees, 5 degrees. We don't know where it'll stop, and we don't quite know what'll happen when we cross 2 degrees. But the last time the world was this warm as we are right now, sea level was 4 to 6 meters higher than it is right now. If Antarctica and the Arctic were to melt, so the polar ice caps were to melt, sea level would rise 68 meters. That means almost every coastal city in the world would be underwater. Now, are we on a trajectory for that? We don't know. But can we turn it around? Well, the IPCC says we can in 11 years, as long as we reach these 45% reduction. So you see the vastness of the change that needs to happen here. We're already seeing climate impacts in terms of severe storms, in terms of flooding, in terms of droughts, in terms of fires. And there's huge potential if this doesn't get turned around in terms of our food security on the planet, in terms of species decline, and also impacting our infrastructure. Worst case scenarios here, if we don't turn this around, is that parts of the planet could become uninhabitable. They're particularly looking at the equator, which is actually where most of the world's population lives. So will we see that in our lifetime? No, but we'll see some of it. And unless we turn this around, it's going to be increasing severity. So huge potential here in terms of what can you do to help make this, what can you do to help reduce carbon emissions? The other big crisis I thought I'd bring to your attention is the biodiversity crisis. So this is also from a UN report issued this year. It warns that as many as 1 million species are now at risk of extinction if we don't act to save them. That number includes 40% of all amphibian species, 33% of corals, about 10% of insects. It amounts to a biodiversity crisis that spans the globe and threatens every ecosystem. So again, we're on the wrong trajectory here. We need to turn that around. It's one of the 3 places, as I mentioned at the beginning, that we've crossed planetary boundaries. Again, huge opportunity here for you to help be a part of turning this pattern around. How many people here are already familiar with the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals? Okay, about half of you. For those who didn't put up their hands, these were adopted in 2015, the United Nations, adopted by countries around the world as 17 goals to essentially lay out a path for us to achieve sustainable development on this planet. So it talks about how we're going to address those ecological crises. It also talks about social and economic issues. Within those goals, there's about 11 of them that are particularly environmental. So I recommend you actually start here. Once you've figured out kind of what problem do I want to address, look at the SDGs that are relevant to that. Under each one are targets and indicators. And it might give you some ideas around what the world has come to consensus is in terms of the paths we need to take. The Hult Prize really is focusing on what business can do. They've picked out 11 of these SDGs, 11 of the Sustainable Development Goals around environment. And they really see, and as I do too, we need products and services. We absolutely do as humans. So we need them to be ecologically in line with our planetary boundaries. We need products and services that work within what the planet can manage. And that's where the opportunity lies, and startups are a great opportunity to create things that are really outside the box, that are going to help us achieve that transition. So I pulled this quote from Bill Clinton in the opening launch for the Hult Prize. The prize is not simply looking for ways to make current business practices less environmentally damaging, but for transformative new models that make a positive net impact on the environment with every sale completed, every dollar earned, every decision made. So I want to unpack a couple of the concepts in here. First, around that transformational new model. It's really coming from the climate conversation, how we need this transition to a low-carbon economy or even carbon neutrality by 2050. So imagine the world then, and then think about, well, what are the products we need in a carbon neutral economy? That's the transformation we need. So it's not how can we improve on existing products and services so they're incrementally better. It's what fundamentally do we need to shift so that we're reaching that 45% reduction in GHG emissions in just 11 years, so that we're reaching carbon neutrality by 2050. The other concept here is net or positive net impact. I usually say net positive, which is why I'm getting that backwards. But in essence, whatever you create, whatever product or service you create, there's going to be an environmental impact. You can't get around it. So there's going to be a negative impact. You're going to use resources in some way. So if we take this as 0 and you have this impact, the question is, how much benefit are you providing? Are you replacing something else so it's offsetting it? Are you doing something that helps the world? And does it take it back up to 0 and then net positive? That's the concept of net positive that you're aiming for in whatever product or service you create. This is another quote from the Hult's booklet. We are looking for transformative models that change the very nature of supply chains, that introduce radically new business models, that cause us to rethink the most deeply ingrained patterns of our behaviors, and to reimagine and replace the goods and services to which we are most accustomed, without a reduction of performance, quality, accessibility, or price. So again, you can hear that transformational language, looking for the big ideas to help us, I think in particular around the carbon neutrality, but it's also around zero waste. Just think kind of where do we need to get to at the end of this story. So let me pick a couple of examples. I'm actually going to use example 2 first, which is the Beyond Meat. How many of you have gone into Tim Hortons lately or any of the fast food chains and had a Beyond Meat burger? Yeah, okay, about 30% of the people here. So that Beyond Meat burger, which is essentially a veggie burger, though they're not saying that, it's a plant-based burger, has 99% less water, 93% less land, 90% fewer greenhouse gas emissions, and 46% less energy than a traditional meat burger. Can you see the efficiencies here? What I love about this example is that they've used the existing infrastructure, that is the fast food chains. They've used our existing culture in terms of wanting to eat in this way, also looking for that burger. They've used essentially the systems that are already in place and just substituted one product for another in a way that fits with our culture, fits with our systems, and has significantly less impact on the environment. That's the kind of solution you're looking for here. I'm thrilled that Tim Hortons has come up with this. I've been a vegetarian a long time, but it's mainstreamed it in a real way here by using our existing systems. The other example I just picked is from Waterloo students who launched Polygon. Their initiative is really about getting microplastics out of water. So they're looking at microplastics and how do we remove them. They first came across my radar when they won a North American prize on youth and innovation. They've won a lot of prizes here on campus and in Communitech as well. But what their initiative does is it's really addressing kind of plastics and biodiversity, and addressing human health. So another example of kind of a startup that can reach this kind of scale. My own research in the Youth and Innovation Project, I co-lead a project here on campus called Youth and Innovation Project. And what we're learning through that is we've been doing research on youth-led innovation, youth-led impact. But what we're seeing in particular, the brain research is showing us, between the ages of 15 and 25, you're really at your innovation peak in terms of thinking for radical innovation. The way your brain development is you're at your most potential to think out of the box, to see potential opportunities, but not be locked into existing patterns. So the Hult Prize has it right. They're aiming for kind of this age group, to aim for the students, to see what ideas can we come up with that aren't already locked into existing systems. So I'm just going to end with a few sustainable business concepts. You may or may not be aware of these already. But as I go through them, kind of think, well, which ones of these might I want to pick up on or delve deeper into? So in terms of the path to carbon neutrality, most of the work I'm seeing in this space right now is working on replacing fossil fuels with renewable resources in some way or another. We're transitioning our mobility systems, our housing systems, our energy systems, our food systems, and a lot of that is shifting. Another thing I see in this space is a lot of work on efficiency. So the Beyond Meat example is a good example of that kind of efficiency. And the new emerging stuff I see in this space is around carbon sinks. And I actually think this has a lot of potential. So this is the idea of we're going to draw down the carbon and we're going to sequester it in products. So Interface is doing it with carpet tiles, for example. So really out of the box thinking on how can we draw down some of that carbon. Another thing you might think of in terms of environment is circular economy. How many people know this term? Hands up. Okay, about half of you. Great. So circular economy is about us getting to zero waste. It's about us thinking about materials in the system. And in essence, we're talking about two cycles in the circular economy. One cycle is for organics or biological items, in which case we want those materials to go back into the soil. We want them to compost. The other cycle we call the technical cycle, and that's for things that are recyclable. We want to reclaim those materials, remanufacture them, recycle them into new products and services, but keep them in circulation. Keep those materials in circulation. Essentially, anything else that doesn't fit one of those two cycles, we want to stop using. So we want to start fitting our products and services into one of these two cycles in a way that we can move towards zero waste. The next concept, I'm seeing a lot of work these days in eliminating plastics pollution. So what's particularly happening in this space is around shifting to bio-based products. You're probably seeing it with plastic straws. right? We're moving away from plastic straws and the single use, and we're moving to a bio-based straw, usually paper or something else that could decompose. So whatever you choose, make sure you take a systems thinking approach. The Hult Prize particularly calls for it. So you start thinking through the impacts that it might have on other environmental or social systems. And they also ask for you to come up with a way to measure your environmental impact. So there are already some existing systems out there for doing that. The most common are using a carbon footprint, which is a CO2 or a CO2 equivalence, an ecological footprint, which uses land, or a water footprint. So in closing, I would suggest you come at this prize by really starting with the environmental problems. Really think about which one do you care about, which one is really gripping you, and then is it climate, is it plastics and waste, is it biodiversity, is it something else? Then think about what are the major causes of that problem? What is it that's causing the most climate change and putting up the most greenhouse gas emissions? Then think about a product or service that could substitute, could replace the one that's causing the problem. That'll be a way to come up with something that's quite transformational. So this is my suggested approach on this, but you'll come up with your own. I also suggest you keep your idea as much as possible within existing culture, within existing infrastructure, within existing human behavior. It's much easier to substitute a plant-based burger for a regular burger and have it go out through all the existing infrastructure than to have to try and create all your own shops and sell them directly. So think about that. Where's the substitution opportunities here? Finally, do a systems thinking brainstorm to think through what might be the unintended ecological and social consequences. So that way, right at the front end of your design, you can start addressing them and trying to avoid them. So I'll end there, but I will tell you, I was the director of our Master of Environment Business program here for 10 years. And I'm a really strong believer that business is going to be a huge part of our solutions. We need these products and services, but we also need to get to a place where when you're looking for products and service, every single option in front of you is a good choice. So you don't have a choice between a good choice and a bad choice, but every choice is a good choice. And that way we can stay within the planetary boundaries. So I have a lot of hope for this, and really it's an opportunity for you. There's a $1 trillion market in implementing the Sustainable Development Goals, and so one, you can help save the world, you can make money, and then just do good in general. So I'll end there. We have time for questions, though. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Clarke. Those are some fantastic takeaways. I hope some of you are taking notes, or you can watch the video later, particularly the points around closed-loop systems using existing infrastructure. I think those are really good tips. So thank you very much again for being here. We have about 10 minutes for Q&A, so we'll open it up. We also have a couple of runners, or one runner. We have 2 runners here, so please, anybody who would like to ask the first question. We have one over here. Yeah. 1 second. We have Christian.
Hey, hello. Just a question back to the 2030 thing. So we have to reduce CO2 emissions by 45%. So what happens if we don't reach that exactly?
We're going to miss the 1.5 degrees. So
then the sea levels would go up a substantial amount of meters?
yeah, so essentially what they're trying to do, they've created a carbon budget for the world. And so the IPCC has thought through from a scientific way, we have this much left carbon to put up. And if we achieve that, and that's where that trajectory of decline is happening, then we could actually keep the world within a 1.5 degrees increase in global temperature. If we miss it, then we'll perhaps reach the 2 degrees. Right now, we're actually going the wrong way still. So we haven't even turned that trend on the way down yet. So if we keep going this way, then you're just going to see, we don't actually know where it will stop. Is it 3 degrees, 4 degrees, 5 degrees? And then you just start seeing increasing impacts.
Thank you.
Good contextual question. We have a question over here. Ishan? Oh, we'll come back to you, sorry.
Hi. You mentioned the idea of making carbon sinks or using products that, say, would draw out ambient CO2 and then use those as products. But I was thinking within the context of like the Hult Prize about incentivizing like changed behavior, doesn't creating more carbon sinks not incentivize businesses to change their practices? So if you knew that more CO2 is being sucked out by other people, wouldn't that incentivize you to just produce more CO2 because you know someone else is drawing out more of it?
So the goal here isn't necessarily to change policy. It's to create new products and services that are going to help save the world. So if the products and services exist, then we're going to start transitioning. We're going to start moving to those products and services that are within the planetary boundaries. So does it really matter if the business over here is not doing it, if we're starting to solve it here? And they'll either shift, they'll either buy you out, or they'll go out of business in the long run. Because we are shifting to this low-carbon economy, or we're in big trouble. So it's one path or the other here, but being a part of the solution space is going to be key to us solving this. So I'm kind of dancing around your question a little bit, but really, frankly, it doesn't matter to me what the next guy does, because eventually policy will catch up, and they'll either change or they'll go out of business. Yes. No.
Thank you. I'm not, I don't know if it's working. I'm not a specialist, but it seems to me that I read some articles about solution already existing, about mechanism, I don't know, super tree that take out the carbon from the atmosphere. It seems that sometimes the difficulty is now that we don't have any product. Maybe we don't have solution yet to make it more available. So within the Hult Prize could be solutions that we use discoveries that are already there, and maybe we find a way to commercialize at a larger audience.
I think you're going to hear from some examples from others where that's exactly what they proposed. They took it to a new market where it's not currently disseminated. So that still allows for some out-of-the-box thinking in terms of how would you reach those markets? What would be the business model to go with this? Because technically, it's already been figured out, but we haven't necessarily figured out the dissemination.
Yep. In terms of the application process.
Sorry, where am I looking?
Oh, sorry, I didn't know
Sorry,
either. Can you
yeah.
stand up? Do you
Over
mind
here,
standing
yeah.
up? Or?
Maybe standing up, yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, hello everyone. So in terms of the application process, is it more like a white paper process, more like a pitch competition, or maybe that's a question for another round, right?
Yes, if you can save that, we'll be going over those details a little bit later. He's asking about the competition runs. We'll get to that.
Oh,
That's
okay,
not-
so another question.
Oh,
I was
sure.
having some
prepared.
understanding of the application, for example, the sustainable goals, in terms of, for example, work opportunities. If that's one of the competition goals, wouldn't be necessarily be for sustainable business using, for example, circular economy. Maybe it's something that can be just specific for one specific goal, or should it be developed to more than one?
So
Thank you.
it's actually pretty hard to just do one goal. They're so interrelated. If you're working on sustainable cities, chances are you're touching energy, or you're touching housing, or you're touching people in some way. And that's true for each of the goals. So you can't work on climate with also not touching energy. And they've picked 11 goals, so it would surprise me that you could actually work on one and not touch others, because they're so integrated. But I actually don't know the answer if it's a value to touch more than one. I actually think it's more a value to have the highest net positive environmental impact possible while having a business model that actually works. But I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. As Amelia just described, often the SDGs are so interconnected that you're likely going to hit on more than one, but I wouldn't that's not the central focus. It's more about the net positive impact, and then that will be secondary, and you'll get there as well. So we have, I want to make sure that we don't miss, we have Rob, several questions, and we'll try to speed it up. So if the runners can move the mic to the next person while we have the answer. So we have Rob first, and then Taylor, and then we'll move back to James. Go ahead.
Based on your experience, what would be one of the largest or some of the largest barriers to actually get into market? Would it be policy or politics or businesses, consumer behavior maybe?
Part of the challenge is around the business model. So who are your customers? Who's going to buy it? There's a lot of interest in startups. There's a lot of interest in the space, particularly in the Canadian context. So I don't think it's that initial. Depending on what you create, it could be a policy barrier in that, for example, there might be housing bylaws that don't allow composting toilets in houses. I'm just making this up, but sometimes laws can actually get in your way of disseminating new ideas because the building code says X, and therefore new innovations aren't even allowed in those buildings. So I made that one up, but that's actually a true one. Composting toilets are not allowed in many cities. So I don't know what your barrier is going to be because it depends on what you create. But the first challenge is actually going to be your business model, in my opinion. How can you keep this viable? Where's the money coming in?
Yep, go ahead, Taylor.
So just a quick question around the supply chain aspect of the Hult Prize. It seems like a lot of the examples we heard of were disrupting the overall atmosphere, but not really affecting the supply chain. Beyond Burger didn't change the supply chain. So with the idea of the Hult Prize for 2020, how much is that going to be part of it with the new business model with supply chain? Is it just substitutions we should look at? Or not look at, but focus on as opposed to changing the entire industry with regards to supply chain?
So I think there's a lot of room here. It depends where your core interest, what environment things you're tackling. But you could actually argue that they are changing the supply chain for the retail outlet. So in terms of the procurement that the retail outlet is their supply has shifted now from cows to plant-based. So it just depends on where you are in that supply chain, where you are in the life cycle of those products. So I'm just pushing it back there, but if you think broader on supply chain to think life cycle, there might be more room there.
Okay, and we'll take 3 quick questions because there are lots of questions out there. So first, James, go ahead. Oh, do we need a mic? Oh, sorry, I don't know where. Oh, yeah, Yulia, can you stand up? Sorry.
Hi, thanks for can you hear me? Okay, yeah. Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. My question is around CO2 offset programs. So there's already like a lot of CO2 offset programs for organizations. So for instance, if an organization is emitting X amount of CO2, they can donate X amount of dollars to like plant trees to offset their CO2 emissions. So my question is, do you think that companies around the globe will be incentivized enough to participate in such programs, or will the government have to step in and set policies?
Both. So you're going to need government policies on the offset. There's a certain amount of voluntary market, but ultimately you need the cap to come down so they can only release so much emissions, and therefore there's a reason they want to offset. So I don't know if I've answered you there, but government policy is definitely a part of the story here.
She said otherwise people won't be incentivized enough. Did you hear? Yeah.
Yes. So there might be certain markets that are driving towards, for example, a lot of companies lately have committed to 100% renewable energy. You've probably seen Amazon, Google, some big ones. So if they can't produce the energy themselves, they're going to be looking to offsets. In British Columbia, it's mandatory for all public institutions, universities, municipalities to be carbon neutral. If they're not, they have to offset the difference. So there are places already where I think there's incentives.
Okay, next we have, we have one at the end, and then, do you have a mic in your hand, James? Oh, okay, go ahead.
Right. How is the number of 1.5 degrees Celsius chosen?
So I'm not the science behind this, but I do recommend you read the report from the IPCC. I think it's kind of the lowest they possibly could aim for. Frankly, I think we're so locked in that they couldn't imagine aiming any lower.
Do we know who chose this?
So the whole Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, it's a UN body. It involves, I think, about 1,000 scientists around the world that come to consensus on their approach. So they did a report on 1.5 degrees. It came out of the post-Paris. So in Paris, they agreed to lower than 2 degrees. And then the report was commissioned to look at, well, what would 1.5 look like? What would it mean to try and aim for a 1.5 trajectory? So this is coming from the global bodies.
And that document, we'll be happy to share that document. It's over 200 pages, but even just reading the exact summaries is pretty telling in terms of what's happening. Okay, one last question.
I was just going to say,
sorry, go ahead.
The data I got was from chapter 2. So if you want to start looking through, and that actually shows you the science behind it. It's not me, I'm not the scientist.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Instead of changing, like creating a business product or a service, are we allowed to create or design a new business model that can be applied to different sustainable businesses?
So you'd have to look closely at it, but they're really emphasizing product service, but they're also looking for new business models within that. So, but I don't know. Look closer. I'm not a Hult person, so I read the booklet, so I can't really answer.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we can talk about that in our networking session as well. Like what I can say is that often there is a focus on new products and services, but revolutionary business models can also be part of it. It's similar to the question around supply chains. Like you can kind of transform what's existing or come up with new ones. But we'll send you more information as we proceed. Again. Okay, I'd like to thank Dr. Amelia Clarke for her time. And we have Kayleanna has a little token that she'd like to present. Please join me in thanking Dr. Amelia Clarke. Okay, thank you again, Dr. Clarke, for being here. That was fantastic context, and I think, as you mentioned, it helps level the playing field a bit in terms of understanding what are the important contextual things that you need as a starting point before you move forward. So, I would like to start with this quote. This is one of my favorite quotes of all time from the French novelist, playwright Victor Hugo, who said, "There's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come." And in preparing for tonight, it's something that I've been thinking about a lot because on one hand, if you think about the climate crisis and even some of the stats that Dr. Clarke mentioned in the research, it can be really overwhelming, right? To think about the impacts that we're going to face regardless of what we improve, like those are some dire consequences to past human action and business action in some cases. But on the other hand, when we see the level of awareness that's rising, when we, especially right now, I mean, the 7 million young people who have been on climate strike, you know, you see these kind of the movements, the waves of change, and it's not just from activists, it's from citizens. You know, it's become a big voter issue in our upcoming federal election. It's now anybody who's following any of that. It's kind of interesting to see that it's become a top voter issue here in Canada. Bill Clinton, who was speaking to the Waterloo team that was at the Hult finals just a month ago, actually spoke about his concerns around the environment and how it has to become a voter issue in North America and beyond. And we're seeing that happen. So it's not just, as Dr. Clarke said, it's really a systems kind of issue and approach that we need to consider. And businesses are also pushing for change. So when you mention big businesses like Amazon looking at renewables, that's huge. So we do find optimism in what's happening in terms of the wave of interest and awareness that's happening finally after decades of scientific research pointing us that way. So I'm here to do a brief overview of what social entrepreneurship is and what it isn't, and why we feel there's a role for social entrepreneurship in this year's challenge. And to give you kind of pointers on tools to help you get started. So social entrepreneurs, this is one definition, are entrepreneurs with a social mission, but at the core, they are first and foremost entrepreneurs. So when you think about the foundational concepts we talk about with regular entrepreneurs of people who are finding and leveraging opportunities that they see, that find the resources that they need to take advantage of these opportunities or to create that opportunity and value, and the resources to create ventures as individuals and in their teams have the qualities in themselves to be agents of change and to solve problems that are important in business, in society, in our environment. This all still applies to social entrepreneurs, as does the need for a sustainable business model and revenue model. And I'd like to emphasize that last point because often there's a misconception around social entrepreneurship that they don't care at all about profit. It's just a bunch of people trying to so-called, quote-unquote, save the world. And that's not true entirely, in the sense that it's true that the core driver is social impact, environmental impact, having value in those spaces. However, profit is still very important in terms of having sustainable business models, and that might seem obvious, but unfortunately, as often is the case in sort of social spaces, we can sometimes forget about that. Another key role that social entrepreneurs help to address is what economists call market failures, and those of you who have taken microecon, any economics courses may have come across that term, and these market failures happen when the allocation of goods and services in the free market aren't fully efficient. Climate change is one of the biggest market failures of our time, and this is as economists and scientists see it. And part of this, and there's many kind of sub-issues and big ones within climate change, but if you think about greenhouse gas emissions as an example, this is an example where the full costs of the emissions aren't necessarily faced by the biggest emitters directly or immediately. So if you think of, the biggest polluters of greenhouse gases, not only, like the impacts of that might be felt by less resilient populations. You think about so-called developing countries, they are less resilient to climate change. Or you think of future generations, and this is why young people, for good reason, are standing up, because they're realizing some of the worst impacts will be felt in future, right, beyond my lifetime or your lifetime. And so that's also important. The area of environmental issues is thus one where businesses, governments, citizens need to take an active part in playing a bigger role in addressing this that we can't just leave to the free markets. Okay, so another thing I'd like to show is kind of this framework that helps us understand from Martin and Osberg what social entrepreneurship is not. So there are many players in this space of social engagement, all have their merits. So if you look at the top left, it might be hard for you to see, that's fine. It says social service provision. So these are people, if you think about conventional charity models, they're often seen as social service providers. So a typical food bank, for example, that's a social service provider and usually runs under a charity model where there's direct action with beneficiaries. So you are trying to help or improve outcomes for beneficiaries directly. However, the current system is generally maintained. It might be improved, but you're still working within kind of a current system. And so that's social service provision. There's a need for this. If you think about emergency situations, natural disasters, and that immediate aftermath, there's a lot of charities that help out, right, in addressing kind of urgent crises. That said, it's not social entrepreneurship. Now, in the bottom right corner, you see social activism mentioned, and as has already been mentioned, this is quite prominent right now in the environmental space. So it's not just young people like Greta Thunberg. We have First Nations activists like Autumn Pelletier here in Canada who's been working at this since she was 8 years old, trying to bring that awareness and shift mindsets, but that's done generally indirectly. That's how activism works, is to change behavior and raise awareness, but can be very effective and shift systems completely. So there's quite an important role there, especially when you think about what's happening now with the environment. Now, last but not least is what we're interested and focused on is social enterprise. So that's in the top right corner. The aim of social enterprise is to also have direct action with either beneficiaries in a general social impact space or here with environmental impacts, and to be involved with the communities that are impacted by the consequences of climate change, for example. And it's really aiming to shift systems and equilibriums. So there can be power in some of these players working together. An example could be activists helping raise awareness while social enterprise is able to actually create the sustainable business models to really see through that change in consumer behavior and beyond. And it also shows you the importance of when timing can align to really help push things forward. And I think that's one of the things that keeps me optimistic about the challenges that we're facing with the climate crisis. So one approach that you can consider that some of us have been using already is called design thinking. And it's not the only approach, but it is an approach to helping tackle complex social problems. And a few of the reasons why we choose to use some of the tools that are kind of provided within a design thinking framework, some of these reasons come from Tim Brown's book, Change by Design. And he talks about how design thinking offers an approach to innovation that's effective, that's accessible, and it offers new choices. So when Dr. Clarke also mentioned this, we're trying to look for more than just the incremental changes that often kind of reside in existing businesses, right? Or in existing mindsets where it's hard to think outside of the box. And the fact that many of you are in that magic age range that Dr. Clarke mentioned also can work to your benefit. Another point that I find really interesting with design thinking is trying to shift the approach from just design being a technical thing or looking at design in a technical sense, or considering human issues in terms of human-centered design or human-centered approaches. Design thinking tries to offer an approach that helps marry the two and looks at a third way where you're considering both design as well as developing empathy and understanding that all social environmental issues are human-centered in a sense if you look at their impacts, and we can't ignore that. So, and then the final point here about why a framework like design thinking is this idea of moving from just seeing one person as being the doer of design, so to speak, as one person who has a competence to do design, shifting from that to looking at teams of people, groups of people, you'll be working collaboratively to be design thinkers. So how do we start developing the mindsets to approach problems in a way that are not just creative, but are also very much informed by what's actually happening, and not just trying to sort of fix things by solutioning, so to speak, without understanding the problem. So here are some of the kind of the three main areas within design thinking. Many of you may have seen this model split out into 5 steps with the Stanford D School. And the first space there I'd like you to focus on in terms of diving into the problem, understanding what constraints you have to this problem, and part of that will come from the challenge booklet that is now posted from Hult, but it also will come from your own research, and I push this all the time when I talk to students around really trying to understand what specific things are happening in this space. So what is the research telling you about the problem? What else has been tried? How do you develop empathy for the people who are being impacted by the problem, or in this space when it's around the environment? You know, it's not always directly people, but understanding who those local partners can be that you can team up with and observe and learn from before you move into the ideation. And there are many tools for this online as well in terms of being able to think divergently, brainstorm. We'll send some links through Kayleanna in the coming days. IDEO has some, for example, online that are very helpful if you're not familiar with design sprints, but helping to kind of come up with all the solutions you can think of once you've done that research, once you've read foundational things like the IPCC report and more specific research to your problem, then you can move into the ideation and come up with initial solution spaces. Now, the implementation phase that comes towards the end, we don't really get into the details of that in terms of we have such a short timeline, as Kayleanna will explain shortly. But we do expect you to think through a feasible or reasonable business model by the time you're pitching at campus semifinals, for those of you who will be participating, as well as working towards a pilot and or connecting to partners that are already in this space. That's something you definitely should be doing. Talk to people who are out there who can support your ideas, etc. So you do need to show an idea of next steps and how you'll develop further as you move through the rounds. Now, the final thing I wanted to share is what are the reasons why we continue to engage with Hult? And as was mentioned earlier, this is my 3rd time around helping support teams through the process with Hult. And one of the reasons why I'm an advocate of getting involved is that it's focused on real and relevant problems this year more than any other. I think it gives us a chance to really dive deep into a problem space that's important, not just for new business models, but for our own learning and growth. And not only are you learning, you're applying that learning and you're developing skills in things like storyboarding, pitching, and understanding business models, which might be new to some of you or is still emerging, which is great. And finally, you're developing potentially impactful solutions collaboratively and across disciplines. And this last point I really believe is the future of education and also business, that we need to work across disciplines together within our expertise and across it to really tackle systemic problems. One thing that wasn't mentioned before is the Hult Prize does have a partnership with the UN, which is why they host their finals there. And this year, what's interesting is, you've heard of Earth Day, many of you. This day for Earth Day, they're actually partnering up to make it 2020 Earth Year. And so there will be opportunities as you move through the rounds to share some of your ideas and solutions with that bigger Earth Day/Earth Year network, which is quite interesting. So we are so excited to see what you come up with for this 2020 challenge. Before I pass it back to Kayleanna to walk through the details of the competition rounds, as somebody was asking about, we have a video from our campus round winner from last year, Pulse Home. So they were a Hult team. They were also a capstone team, an interdisciplinary capstone team. They were a strong competitor in Australia as well. So they couldn't be here in person, but wanted to share a few thoughts.
Hi, my name is Paula. I'm one of the co-founders of Pulse Home. One of my favorite things about participating in the Hult Challenge was being forced to think about our venture from a business perspective, which is something we hadn't done so much before, and being given access to the tools and resources to be able to do that. Additionally, being put in an environment where we were surrounded by other teams that were trying to accomplish something similar and make change in the world, especially when we got to go to Melbourne, meeting so many international teams and realizing that we're just one part of a bigger picture trying to make change in the world.
Hi, I'm Sarah, one of the co-founders of Pulse Home. We competed in the 2018 round of the campus finals of Hult at the University of Waterloo and also in Melbourne at the Hult regionals there. One of the things that I wasn't expecting about our Hult experience was how much it was going to push us to consider a completely different set of constraints and boundaries than what we typically consider coming from an engineering side of things. We really had to take a strong focus on the social impact side of things, which wasn't our main priority at the time because we were a capstone project. So we joined the competition about 1 week before the initial round. I think it was the first round of pitches at the University of Waterloo, and we came in with no expectations at all, just with the goal of trying to maybe change our perspective a little, and it completely disrupted where we were going and changed the direction of our project entirely.
Hi, I'm Imad. I'm one of the co-founders of Pulse Home. My favorite thing about competing in the Hult Prize was the fact that you're part of this movement, which is really the largest social movement on this planet. And I think what really shocked me was the fact that the movement isn't necessarily created by one specific person. It's not created by the CEO of Hult, it's not created by the CTO. It really is a bunch of ordinary people coming together to work on completely different projects all across the world, but with one goal of making social impact. And I think I can't express to you how that feels like unless you're part of it. And I really do encourage everyone to join, take the theme as seriously as you possibly can, and really put your all into it, because no matter the outcome, you are going to have the most inspirational and amazing experience of your life.
From us at Pulse Home, good luck everyone.
Good luck.
All right, now the part you've all been waiting for, how to compete. So the on-campus program, which is what Roopa and myself are planning for you all, is a 4-part competition process. So the first round is due on October 31st, and that is quarterfinals, and it's an online video submission. And we recognize that's pretty soon, so it's not that you have to have your entire idea flushed out and all the details tied beautifully and made perfect, but you need to have an idea and a plan, and you just got to pitch yourself, and if you're good, then you get to move on. For anyone who moves on from quarterfinals, you have an opportunity for mentorship. So we have a speed mentoring event where you can come out and meet a bunch of people within the entrepreneurship space, also in the climate and environmental activism space. So if you have ideas for mentors, let me know, but I've been reaching out and trying to talk to a lot of people within the community that are relevant to what the topic is this year and would be able to mentor you. So you can come out to that event, you get to meet all the mentors, talk with them one-on-one, and then you would rank your top people that you think would help you the most, and then I'll match you with a mentor. So you can meet with them a couple times before semifinals, make sure that your idea is viable and worthwhile to explore, and so then that's as best as it could be. And then after that, we have semifinals. It'll be your first opportunity to pitch in front of judges, and the top 8 teams from semifinals will move on to the finals. We will have a big, exciting event here in the E7 event space where those teams are going to pitch. After that, we have regionals. So the winners of the on-campus competition finals will get an automatic entry into regionals. And then those who are finalists in that competition can also apply. So they have an opportunity. They can still go to regionals, but it's not a direct entry. The regionals are in 25 different locations all over the world, close and far. There's one in Toronto, there's a couple in the States, and then there's other places in Asia and the UK, Europe, a lot of exciting places. So whatever would work best for you is where you can apply. So you apply directly to that location. After the regional competition, there's the accelerator. So from regionals, 40 of those teams get accepted into a 6-week incubation program where they will accelerate their idea, flush it out. They'll have access to mentors, and they'll have access to resources to really polish it and make it good. Following that, all the teams are going to pitch again, and the top 6 teams from the accelerator get to go to the global finals where they get to pitch for $1 million. It's very exciting. Last year, Team Phonic, they made it through regionals and into the accelerator and made it to finals, and they got to pitch for that $1 million, and here's some highlights from that event.
Competed in the Hult Prize. Tonight is the Super Bowl, America's Got Talent, and the Nobel Prize all rolled into one.
Rootopia is a social business that empowers these indigenous youths to design and sell trips online. Tolabku, the first pathway in Palestine for students to gain meaningful jobs while studying and after graduating.
To transform organic waste into sustainable protein and fertilizer.
Phonic is market research at scale, powered by a global network of youth and enabled by AI.
We are Tunart, and we are creating meaningful jobs for disconnected youth through sustainable tuna fishing in tropical coastal communities across the world.
SafeWheel, an affordable emergency medical service provider dedicated to serve the rural people of Bangladesh.
Well, with my background in the capital markets, formerly as a director of investment research, I look for companies that can scale, that can figure out how to operationalize their vision. As an entrepreneur, as a founder myself, I look for teams that can work together and complement each other to really implement a long-term vision.
75 million young people around the world are unemployed. The winning team is Rootopia from Tech and Operations.
It's not only 4 of us, it's all the communities and the people, and all the mission of Rootopia, it's because of them and for the young people in Mexico and any country in Latin America that are forced to migrate because there's no jobs, so it's for those people.
It's just to dream big. This is the big thing I take with me from Hult Prize.
To see this idea go from a really small little student competition to a global force has been, remarkable.
When you start talking about a community of millions, you now have enough people to build a future. That's what we're going to need as a society, and that's what makes the Hult Prize so special.
All right, so now is your opportunity to ask questions to previous competitors. We have 3 previous competitors from other years. All of them have competed at regionals, and all of them have been a part of the on-campus competition as well. So you can ask them any kind of logistical or big picture questions, whatever you want. But please welcome Maame, Sebastian, and Gagan.
Okay, welcome, Maame, Sebastian, and Gagan. It's lovely to have them here. I can't wait to hear the way they describe their Hult experience. So before we ask you for the questions you might have of them, I'd like you to each please briefly introduce yourselves, maybe tell us a little bit about your experience with Hult and what you are up to now. Gagan, go ahead.
Hi everyone, my name is Gagandeep Kaur. I was a part of Hult in 2018. Our venture was Agora Water, where we aim to provide clean drinking water to low and medium income communities. For some reasons, we didn't go ahead with it, but talking about the Hult experience, it was really inspiring from learning about the problems, meeting different teams and being exposed to such great mentorship and learning about ways where we could carry out our business and forward the ideas. That was really inspiring.
Fantastic, thanks. And I'll just add that Gagan's team also managed to do some field work in Quito, in Ecuador, just outside. So that added to their learning, which was fantastic. Go ahead, Sebastian.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sebastian. I am co-founder of GridIt. Our company was aiming to provide biogas for cooking purposes in rural Colombia, my country. We pivoted in our idea actually because we decided to go to Bogota regionals in Colombia, and we took that opportunity to do some field work. And well, you learn a lot by being on the field and talking to people. So that was a great experience for us. Well, first because I brought my partners from India and Canada to Colombia for the first time. And second, because I got to learn a lot about my own country in the rural areas.
Thank you. Maame, go ahead.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Maame. I'm from Ghana, and I'm the co-founder of Emergency Response Africa. I was part of Hult last year, and Emergency Response Africa is a health tech company that is transforming the emergency response system in Africa, starting with Nigeria. And being a part of Hult helped us a lot. It helped us think about our idea in a way we hadn't thought of. It helped us accelerate in ways we never thought we could. And it was just a really fulfilling experience to be a part of something great and to meet all these people doing amazing things around the world. It was a great experience.
Awesome, thank you. So with that context, do we have questions about their experience, about the competition, any tips? Here we go, yeah, go ahead. Oh, 1 second, there's a mic coming to you. Just hold that thought.
Hello. How did you prepare for the first step, the video?
Oh, those of you who prepared quarterfinal videos, any tips on that? Remember?
Okay, our first video submission, we actually had a very rough idea of what we wanted to do. At that point, we were not thinking about biogas, we were thinking about providing electricity to people. And we just came up with a business model that would empower people to learn and kind of employ themselves, sort of. We just had this idea that it was going to work in Indonesia, actually, because we had done some research. We took a room and we shot a video with a white background, trying to be as good as we could with diction and just trying to make it work in post-production. We didn't have the full idea yet, but we did know that we wanted to go with small rural communities at least. That's pretty much everything we did.
And I'll just help clarify before Gagan adds on to that. For the quarterfinal submission, as we mentioned, Kayleanna will send more details, but basically at that stage, it's a few weeks away. We know you won't have a fully baked solution yet, but we are just looking for you to describe to us what problem are you specifically aiming to address? What are you thinking about in terms of the solution space, and who is the team? It's pretty simple, so don't get overwhelmed by that, but just that was the side. Go ahead, Gagan.
Sure. Actually, Roopa answered it really well. The way we prepared for it was researching about the problem the most, and then just explaining a little bit about the idea, because even we were not sure at that stage, that early stage, what we were going to do exactly. So it was more about finding as much about the problem as we could, and then explaining a bit about the solution that we had.
Yeah? You want to answer that?
So we thought of the idea we had, and then we thought of the problem at hand, and we found a way to put it so that it's clear in the video, because we just had like a limited amount of time. So just a way to put the idea into perspective, and that's what helped us.
Great, thank you. Oh, we have a question at the back. Is it Kanika? And then we have a couple questions up here after. Go ahead.
Hey guys, so my name is Kanika, and my question revolves around just choosing the right idea. So a lot of times we'll come up with ideas, and many of them have been implemented already. But I mean, there's always certain gaps that we can improve in the current ideas that are already in the market. So do you recommend finding something that has never been implemented before, or do you think it's okay to work on something that's already out there, but then find a better solution to that problem?
Yes, definitely the latter. I can say for a fact that emergency response is not new here in North America, but it's entirely different back where I'm from, back in Ghana, back in Nigeria. So it's not a different idea, but the context in which you put it in and the way you put it together makes it a whole new solution where you're targeting. So that's what I'll say. Definitely not an entirely new idea, but the way you put it in goes a long way.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. For us, it's way easier to just take on a technology that already exists, a product that already exists, and bring it into a new market with new ideas of how to make it work. That's pretty much what we did in Colombia with biogas. However, if any of you has a patent, has a new technology that is developing and can see it being tailored for this, go ahead and do it, because that works wonder. Like, if you can say in a pitch that you have a patent, you're pretty much true. Like, that's going to help a lot. But yeah, for the rest of us, yes, that definitely works. Taking a product that exists and making it work in a new market, definitely.
Okay, we have a couple questions here. Go ahead. Sorry, I don't know your name. Go ahead.
Hi. My name's Kyle, spelled with a Q. I have actually two questions. So my first question is, what fidelity of information are we looking at presenting with the Hult Prize initially, for at least for the video? Are we looking at diagrams of like how the industry works, how it connects to other industries? Are we looking at stakeholder maps? Like, what kind of fidelity are we looking at there?
I missed it. Sorry, what kind of what are you looking at there?
What level of information detail do we want on the problem when we first start off of the video?
That's a big question. I would say once you isolate, sorry, do you mind if I take this? Do you guys want to, just when you isolate the problem space, sorry, it's such a question that it's the kind of question I get, is that you go as deep as you can. So as much information as you can, but realizing the constraint of time. Like you don't have the next 6 months to do this. So given that, go as deep as you can before jumping into solution space. Sorry, do you guys have anything to add?
If I can add a little bit on top of that, you have a very short time to present the problem, the solution, and why you think your solution is going to work, like your team or whatever. So think of it as a sales pitch. You have to get the person interested in this. Like if I go into detail about why it's a problem that chairs don't have big enough legs or whatever, you have to wonder, why do I care?
Yeah.
So use your time wisely as to get the person who's seeing you be empathetic with you, saying, I care about this, I want to know how you're going to solve it. That would be my only tip for that.
Okay. And second question, just really quick. Is there a preference for a team limit on size, team size limit for the Hult Prize itself?
Yeah, there is. Sorry, I just felt bad jumping in again, but that was my type of question. Basically, you have to have a team of 3 or 4. The max is 4, all current students. We have a question from Chai, and then over there we have a question, then we'll move back here to Kayleanna.
Hey everyone. So in terms of your personal experience during the ideation process, what personal roadblocks did you encounter and how did you overcome them?
So for our idea, it's hard to show traction because we just came up with it. So I think that was the main... Hello? Yeah. So in order to show the judges that this idea will work in our context, you have to have some numbers. You should have talked to people. You should have done a lot of research, and that was a major challenge. Just showing that this idea might be common to people in North America, but taking it into our context, it makes a lot of difference. So just bringing that out and fitting that all into the pitch was one of the challenges we had. Yeah.
I would like to add to that, there was another one that we faced. While you're ideating and looking for solutions, once you get a solution and you really believe in it, it's really difficult for you to believe that or to actually come to peace that it may not work as well as you think. So you have to be open to different new ideas during at least your ideation phase. Because you could be looking for a solution, you find one solution, you think it may work, but you have to do your research well and make sure that it will work. At least you should be able to believe that it will work. That would be the one that I would say.
Yeah, good tip. Don't be too attached to the solution at first, right? We have a question over here, and then Kayleanna over there.
Yes, so my question is, how did you choose your geographic area of focus?
question on regional area. How did you choose your area of focus?
So my co-founder, and it's a great question, by the way. My co-founder and I are both from Africa, and we had both experienced the lack of emergency response in Africa. So it just made sense that we should go for an idea or a solution that would target a problem that touches us personally, and that's why we picked that geographical area to focus on.
You mean geographical area or? Okay. Well, I'm Colombian, but we did start focusing on Indonesia, though, and that was a very weird decision for us. We were kind of blind. That's why I agree with the previous point of just don't get attached to your solution. You don't know everything. At first, we decided that we wanted to tackle unemployment by improving the small economies in general. Like, in small economies, there's a lot of unemployment because just there isn't money to hire anyone. So if you go to small economies and you start your project there, you're going to be able to employ a lot of people. And Indonesia has a lot of disconnected islands that have a lot of energy problems, a lot of unemployed people. That's why we started choosing Indonesia. And then we decided that Colombia also has a lot of disconnected areas because of its terrain. Rural Colombia is very disconnected as well. So pretty much tailor the problem, I guess, figure out where the problem is worse, and that would be the area you should focus on.
So for us, it was, first of all, research, finding out where exactly the problem existed, and then prioritizing where we could get access. Because a problem could be there in a whole different part of the world, but can you reach it? Can you reach the place where you want to place your solution? That would be really important in your decision.
Okay, great. Kayleanna. And then after this one, we have time for maybe one or two more questions. Go ahead, sorry.
On the note of targeting a region, I think a relevant challenge with targeting developing countries is figuring out the business model. And I think Dr. Clarke sort of emphasized finding a viable business model. So can you speak a little bit about your process around finding something viable and also answering the question, how am I going to make money, especially, you know, with the regions you're targeting?
It's a very good question.
Okay, so when we went to Colombia at first, we had this idea in mind that we would start a biogas plant using local dumps and just taking organic waste and getting biogas out of it. We quickly realized that was not going to work. There is no money to do that. That's the bottom line. But we did talk to several people in municipal governments, and we realized that they do have a problem with waste. They spent a lot of money to get rid of waste. So we thought, well, maybe you can use this money for something else and take this waste and make it into biogas. And then we talked to users, and they are spending money to buy LPG, to buy gas to cook. So we figured we better not disrupt that economy. We don't need either the municipality nor the people to make a big investment. They're going to be spending the same amount of money, only in a different product. That's how we came up with the business model. It will be just a different product within the same amount of money they're paying for, and it's going to be better because the money will stay within the economy and the environment and all of that.
I would say research and talk to more people. That's the only way you're going to find out if your business model will fit the geographical area. Because for us, we had to do a lot of research to find out that a lot of a lot of medical care is out of pocket. So it's not through insurance. People are paying for healthcare out of pocket, and you have to know how much they're willing to pay. So a lot of research went into that. A lot of talking to people went into that. There was a survey sent out, but I'm not saying they should do all of this. Just find out the facts, find out what has worked before, find out from the people themselves what they think, and that goes a long way.
Great. Do we have oh yeah, sorry, two more questions. I don't know where I'm looking. Oh, there we go, Gabe.
So the whole competition moves pretty quickly, and you need to ensure that you have success at every stage in order to make it to the next stage of the competition. My question is, at what point do you realize that you need to pivot in order to make it to the next stage? Like, how do you identify those pivots in order to attack them early?
Actually, I don't have a definite answer for that. The simple reason is you could realize it at any point of time. Because as you continue doing your research, finding more and more about the problem, as well as the solution you're suggesting, as soon as you realize it, it would be better. So it's not like you would know at a stage. You would just know because it's not working out.
We had to make a very rough decision when we were in Bogota for the regionals. We went there with one idea that got us to the regionals, and we had to pivot on the field 4 days before the competition. This pivot, we knew that was going to get us kicked out. We knew that it was not going to help us go into the next round, because a biogas plant can employ a lot of people, but household biogas digesters don't. But we made the decision to pivot anyways because we believed that this new business model was actually viable. So at this point, we just prioritized making the company viable instead of advancing in the competition. I don't know if that helps at all, but that's what we did.
Very good. Okay, so one thing I just want to add, kind of a funny story about pivots, is that the team that pitched at the UN that we've mentioned a few times, because I agree with the advice that Gagan mentioned, like if you realize something's not working or it doesn't make sense, you pivot as early as possible, kind of obviously, but sometimes you don't realize until you're further ahead or you don't get the information you need. So Team Phonic was Better Bail for America until 3 weeks before that UN final pitch. They made it past the campus round, they won their regional, they were in the accelerator based on a platform related to criminal justice reform, which is a very interesting and fascinating space, but once they started to do field work that came a bit later for them in the spring, they were visiting courthouses in the US, and when they had further kind of mentorship at that point at the accelerator, they, for many reasons, decided to pivot away from that into something totally different, like it's a market research AI platform, right? And it's not, the pivots are not always that dramatic, but they happen, and they happen at all stages, I think, to reiterate that. But as soon as you realize something isn't feasible, I think that that's fair advice, and it does depend on your objectives in terms of, is this about the competition, or are you committed to this thing in terms of the business and the solution, which even in the role I play here, I would, the latter is in many ways more important, especially with this year's theme, right? So I'd put that in front of the competition, but that's my take. Okay, we had another question here. Go ahead, Ashish.
Funnily enough, my question was kind of similar to the last one, but in a similar vein, did you guys utilize, iterating with the process for the Hult Prize? Maybe at a lesser scale than a pivot, but for example, when did you know that your solution was now at its final stage and no more, additional research and tinkering was needed?
I don't think that has even stopped at this point. There's always something new you learn about the problem you're solving. There's always new insights that you need to take on. And I'd say that I didn't experience pivoting in such a large on such a large scale. But even with your slides, the story you're telling, the way you're pitching, there's the order of the slides also counts, right? And every time you pitch to different people, you get different feedback, and it's up to you to determine which feedback you're going to take, which one makes sense, and which one is going to add or subtract from your entire solution.
I would just say that that's not only for the competition, but in general, as a startup, you have to be willing to be researching, doubting yourself every step of the way. Sometimes you feel super confident. We actually got some customers interested in buying our product back in Colombia, but you can be a blockbuster. You can have the greatest company, you can have a bunch of customers, all of a sudden something changes. If you're not paying attention, you're left behind. So startup mentality, you have to always be on the lookout for a possible pivot or a change.
Is that our final question? Okay, thank you all very much for your questions, and to our Q&A panel, who are fantastic, have lots of insights for you. We encourage all of you to stick around for the networking session because you can have a lot more of this, as well as conversations with each other. Kayleanna has some small tokens of appreciation. Thank you again. If you can join me in giving them a round of applause. Okay, so I have an exciting announcement to make around prizes and prize money. Unfortunately, Mark Weber couldn't be here with us tonight, who's the director of the Conrad School and loves making this announcement. He does a better job than I will, but here we go. We're very excited that this year we will have prizes for our top 3 campus finalists. So our first place team will receive the prize of $3,000. That's in support of your venture and or to support your attendance at regionals, depending on where you choose to go. Given our theme this year, we will encourage teams to choose locations that are close by, right, considering travel and carbon, etc. Anyhow, so $3,000 for our first place team. Our second place prize is $2,500 for our second place team, similarly to support your attendance at regionals or to support research and development for your venture. And for third place as well, the prize is $2,500 for the same thing, to support regionals and or your venture in terms of research and development. So we're very excited about that. Hopefully that's an extra motivator. And that helps lead us into some of the thank yous that we have. We'd like to thank our generous community sponsor, ECL, Electrical Contacts Limited. Our prize money is thanks to their support, and they've now supported us for a few years. We're very grateful for that. We'd also like to thank the Conrad School of Entrepreneurship and Business, the Eaton Directorship for continued support of our campus programming. Like I said, Mark couldn't be here, but he's a very enthusiastic supporter and his leadership has helped to see this grow. Our faculty members, many of them are here today, and faculty from across campus, really grateful for your support. They help with everything from helping to coach teams and judging semis and being involved, so that's great, and we're very grateful. To our marketing team here at Conrad, thank you to Pam and Jason, who are here somewhere, who help out with everything. To Nina Ripley, thank you very much. To our AV team, who is here tonight. So we have Diane, Derek, and Eric, and Justin, who's probably not here, who have helped us out. Thank you. To our student volunteers tonight, we have Simon and Hannah, who've been taking photos discreetly wherever they are now. Thank you. And we also have Senate, Vachana, and Darren, who have been helping us out. So thank you so much for your help today. And last but not least, actually second last, Kayleanna Giesinger, who joined. I just met her in July, and she's like a firecracker in the best way possible. She has a fantastic eye for design. She's just been so incredible to work with, and I'm really inspired by you, and I'm excited that this is just the beginning of our event, so I really look forward to what else you have to contribute. Thank you so much, Kayleanna, and to all of you, the people who participated in our Q&A panel, our special guest speaker, thank you so much for giving of your time. We really appreciate that. And to every one of you who have decided to come and learn more and to participate, we're so excited to have you here and can't wait to see the ideas that you come up with. So I'll pass it back to Kayleanna to give you a bit on the next portion of the program.
And also a huge thank you to Roopa, and we would be nothing without her. Like I said before, she's very wise and valuable. So after this, you can follow the next steps that I'll be posting on our Facebook, and then as soon as I get access to our website, which would be sometime next week, hopefully, fingers crossed. So you can check our website sometime next week. Also check our Facebook, like us on Facebook. Other than that, though, I have all your emails because I got you guys to give your emails to registration when you first came in, whether if you registered beforehand or walked in. I'm going to email you all tomorrow with all the information you'll ever need. It'll be a bulky email, but you'll probably want it all. So I'm going to email you guys everything you need. If you don't get an email from me tomorrow, that means your email is wrong or you didn't give me your email. So email me. So you can find that on Facebook, or it's just K and then my last name, Giesing, at uwaterloo.ca. So email me if you don't get an email and you want the email. Yeah, that's all. Now, we have networking and food, which is exciting. You get free food and drinks as a reward for sitting here for so long. Also, when you first come in to the room, we'll lead you to the room, but when you first go in, we want you to fill out a name tag and then grab either a green or a yellow sticker. So green means you're looking for a team. So you can find other green stickered people and you can form a team to compete. Yellow means you're just here to chat, and that's fine too. So when you come in, get a sticker, get a name tag, grab some food, and then I have some conversational prompts on a bunch of different tables. So if one prompt sticks out to you, you can sit down and talk with people about that, or you can just find other people and talk. It's pretty flexible, whatever you want. but that's what the next steps are. Thank you all again for coming. Just making sure I got everything. Yeah, and we will lead you to the next room.